Deep thinking isn't about having answers, but about finding the right questions.
Hi, this is Dr. Julian Vance. I hope this will teach you something today. Dr. Julian Vance has been with you all the way. And always remember, keep learning, keep pushing forward. Who stops reading, stops growing.
Introduction.
We live in an age where information is everywhere, yet true understanding is rare. Our minds are pulled in 1,000 directions, scrolling, clicking, reacting, but rarely pausing to truly think. The art of deep thinking is an invitation to slow down and go deeper. It's about training your mind to cut through the noise, see hidden connections, and ask the questions that lead to lasting insight. This book is not about thinking more, it's about thinking better. Chapter 1: The Mind Beneath the Surface. In the relentless rush of modern existence, we have become strangers to our own minds. We surf from notification to notification, skimming the surface of thoughts like stones across water, never pausing to dive into the profound depths that lie beneath. Our consciousness has been fractured into fragments, scattered across 1,000 digital distractions, leaving us exhausted yet somehow empty, busy yet unfulfilled. But there exists another realm of thinking, a vast, unexplored territory that most people never discover. It is the mind beneath the surface, where profound insights crystallize, where creativity flows like an underground river, and where the deepest truths about ourselves and our world patiently wait to be uncovered. The archaeology of consciousness. Think of your mind as an archaeological site with multiple layers of civilization built one upon another. The topmost layer, the one we're most familiar with, is cluttered with the debris of daily life. Grocery lists, work deadlines, social media updates, fragments of conversations, and the endless chatter of internal commentary. This is the realm of reactive thinking, where thoughts arise automatically in response to external stimuli, like leaves rustling in whatever wind happens to blow. Most of us spend our entire lives excavating only this surface layer, mistaking the rubble for treasure. We become experts at managing the chaos above ground, while remaining completely ignorant of the ancient wisdom buried just beneath our feet. The second layer down contains our habitual thought patterns, the well-worn grooves of mental activity that we've carved through repetition over years or decades. These are the familiar paths our minds automatically follow. The way we always worry about the same things, the recurring themes in our internal dialogue, the predictable emotional reactions to certain triggers. This layer reveals the architecture of our psychological conditioning, the invisible scaffolding that shapes how we interpret reality. But it is in the deepest layers where the real treasures lie hidden. Here, in the sediment of consciousness that has accumulated over a lifetime of experiences, we find the raw materials of genuine insight. These depths contain not just our personal wisdom, but connections to something larger, patterns that extend beyond our individual experience into the universal currents of human understanding. The tyranny of surface thinking. Our modern world has become expertly designed to trap us in the shallow waters of consciousness. Every beep, buzz, and notification is engineered to capture our attention and hold it at the surface level. We have created a civilization that profits from our distraction, that feeds on our inability to go deep. Consider how you typically spend your day. From the moment you wake up and reach for your phone, you're pulled into a stream of surface-level stimuli. News headlines designed to provoke immediate emotional reactions. Social media posts crafted to generate instant engagement. Work communications that demand immediate responses. Entertainment that requires no contemplation. Shopping algorithms that promise instant gratification. This constant bombardment creates what we might call surface addiction, a compulsive need for new stimuli, for fresh distractions, for the next hit of novel information. We become like addicts of shallow thinking, always needing another fix, never able to sit quietly with our own deeper thoughts for more than a few moments. The cost of this addiction is enormous. When we remain trapped at the surface, we lose access to our capacity for genuine reflection, for creative synthesis, for the kind of deep understanding that can only emerge from sustained contemplation. We become reactive rather than responsive, scattered rather than centered, busy rather than productive. More tragically, we lose touch with our own inner wisdom. The deeper layers of our consciousness contain insights that have been developing and maturing over years, solutions to problems we didn't even know we were working on, creative possibilities that could transform not just our work but our entire way of being in the world. The gateway to depth. The journey from surface to depth begins with a single revolutionary act, the decision to stop. Not to stop thinking entirely. That would be impossible, but to stop feeding the surface-level mental machinery that keeps us trapped in cycles of reactive cognition. This stopping is not a violent suppression of thought, but rather a gentle withdrawal of energy from the surface chaos. Imagine you're at a busy train station with dozens of trains coming and going, announcements blaring, crowds rushing in every direction. The art of deep thinking begins when you step away from the platform and find a quiet bench where you can observe the activity without being swept up in it. When you first attempt this stopping, you'll discover just how addicted to surface stimulation you become. Your mind will resist like a child denied candy. It will generate urgent thoughts, important things you suddenly remember you need to do, compelling reasons why you should check your phone just one more time. This resistance is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're beginning to break free from patterns that have held you captive. The key is not to fight this resistance, but to observe it with curiosity. Notice how your mind generates distractions. Watch the way certain thoughts arise with a sense of urgency, as if they require immediate attention. Observe the subtle anxiety that emerges when you're not constantly consuming new information or engaging in mental activity. This observation itself is the beginning of depth. You're no longer completely identified with the surface chatter. You found a place within yourself from which you can witness the mental activity without being consumed by it. This witnessing consciousness is your first glimpse of the deeper layers of mind. Cultivating the observer self. Deep thinking requires the development of what we might call the observer self, a part of your consciousness that can step back from the immediate flow of thoughts and emotions and observe them with clarity and detachment. This is not the cold, analytical detachment of the critic, but the warm, spacious awareness of someone who has found a deeper place to stand. The observer self is like a skilled naturalist who can sit quietly in the forest and notice things that would be invisible to someone crashing through the underbrush. Where the reactive mind sees only chaos and noise, the observer notices patterns, connections, and subtle dynamics that reveal the deeper order underlying apparent confusion. Developing this capacity requires practice, but it's simpler than you might imagine. Begin by setting aside specific times each day, even just 5 or 10 minutes initially, to practice observation. Sit quietly and simply watch your thoughts arise and pass away. Don't try to control or direct them. Just notice them as you might notice clouds passing across the sky. At first, you'll find yourself constantly getting caught up in the content of your thoughts, pulled back into the surface-level concerns and distractions. This is natural and expected. The moment you notice that you've been swept away by a train of thought is actually a moment of awakening. You've rediscovered the observer and can gently return your attention to the process of watching rather than getting lost in what you're watching. Over time, this practice develops a kind of mental stability that allows you to maintain your observing awareness even in the midst of daily activities. You begin to notice the difference between thinking that arises from reactivity and thinking that emerges from a deeper, more centered place. You develop the capacity to choose which thoughts deserve your full engagement and which can be allowed to pass by like background noise. The architecture of deep insight. When you've established some stability in your observer awareness, you begin to notice that the deeper layers of your mind operate according to different principles than the surface level. Surface thinking is linear, logical, and goal-directed. It moves from A to B to C in predictable patterns. It's the kind of thinking we use to solve math problems, follow directions, or plan our daily schedule. Deep thinking, by contrast, is more like a vast network of interconnected relationships. Ideas don't just follow each other in logical sequence. They resonate together, creating harmonies and symphonies of meaning that can't be reduced to simple cause and effect chains. Insights emerge not through step-by-step reasoning, but through sudden recognitions of patterns that were always there but previously invisible. This deeper level of cognition operates more like an ecosystem than a machine. Ideas cross-pollinate, mutate, and evolve. Seemingly unrelated concepts suddenly reveal their hidden connections. Problems that seemed intractable from the surface level dissolve when viewed from a deeper perspective, not because they're solved in the conventional sense, but because they're seen to be based on assumptions that are no longer necessary. The insights that emerge from this deeper level have a different quality than those produced by surface-level analysis. They feel more like discoveries than inventions, as if you've uncovered something that was already there rather than constructed something new. They often come with a sense of recognition. Of course, how could I not have seen this before? And they tend to have implications that extend far beyond the immediate problem or question that prompted them. The rhythm of depth and surface. Learning to think deeply doesn't mean abandoning surface-level cognition entirely. Both levels of thinking have their place and their purpose. Surface thinking is excellent for handling routine tasks, processing information quickly, and managing the practical details of daily life. The problem arises only when surface thinking becomes our only mode of operation. The art lies in learning to move fluidly between levels of depth according to what each situation requires. This is like learning to use different gears in a car. You need first gear for starting from a complete stop, but you need higher gears for sustained travel at speed. For routine decisions, what to have for lunch, which route to take to work, how to respond to a simple email, surface-level processing is perfectly adequate and efficient. But for questions that touch on meaning, purpose, creativity, or complex problem-solving, you need to be able to shift into deeper gears. This shifting between levels becomes more natural with practice. You begin to recognize the signs that a particular situation calls for deeper consideration, a feeling of being stuck, a sense that the obvious solutions aren't quite right, an intuition that there's something more to discover. These become signals to step back from immediate action and allow the deeper layers of your mind to engage with the situation. The patience of deep understanding. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of developing deep thinking skills is learning to work with a different sense of time. Surface thinking operates on the timeline of immediate gratification. We want answers now, solutions immediately, clarity right away. Deep thinking requires what we might call patient urgency, a recognition that some kinds of understanding can't be rushed, combined with a committed engagement with the process. The deeper layers of consciousness operate more like a garden than a factory. You can plant seeds of questions and problems. You can tend them with attention and care, but you can't force them to bloom on your schedule. The insights will emerge when they're ready, often when you're not directly trying to produce them. This doesn't mean becoming passive or disengaged. Rather, it means learning to hold questions in a state of active receptivity, continuing to feed them with attention and relevant experiences while remaining open to the possibility that the answer might look completely different from what you expected. Many of the greatest insights in human history emerged through this process of patient incubation. Darwin carried the puzzle of evolution with him for years before the pieces suddenly fell into place. Einstein spent a decade wrestling with the problems that eventually led to the theory of relativity. Artists and writers often describe their best work as emerging from periods of sustained attention to questions or themes that they couldn't immediately resolve. Reclaiming your depths. As you begin to develop familiarity with the deeper layers of your own consciousness, you'll start to recognize how much of your essential self has been buried under the accumulation of surface-level concerns and distractions. It's like discovering rooms in your own house that you never knew existed, filled with treasures that you never knew you owned. This recognition often comes with a mixture of excitement and grief. Excitement at the discovery of these inner resources, but grief at how long they've been neglected. You might find yourself wondering how different your life might have been if you'd known how to access these depths earlier, how many opportunities for creativity, insight, and authentic expression you might have missed. But this grief, while natural, is ultimately unnecessary. The depths of your mind are not going anywhere. They've been patiently waiting all along, and they'll be there for as long as you're alive to explore them. Every moment offers a fresh opportunity to step away from the surface chaos and reconnect with the deeper currents of your being. The path from surface to depth is not a one-time journey, but an ongoing practice, a way of life that honors both the practical necessity of surface-level functioning and the profound importance of deeper understanding. As you develop this capacity, you'll find that your relationship with your own mind begins to transform. Instead of being at the mercy of whatever thoughts and emotions happen to arise, you become an active participant in the ecology of your own consciousness. You begin to trust the deeper layers of your mind to work on problems and questions even when you're not consciously focused on them. You learn to recognize the subtle signals that indicate when insights are beginning to emerge from the depths. You develop the patience to wait for true understanding rather than settling for quick fixes and superficial solutions. Most importantly, you rediscover what it means to think as a complete human being rather than as an information processing machine optimized for efficiency and speed. You remember that thinking at its deepest level is not just a tool for solving problems, but a way of participating in the ongoing creation of meaning, beauty, and understanding in the world. The mind beneath the surface is not a luxury for philosophers and artists. It's the birthright of every human being, the source of our deepest wisdom, creativity, and capacity for authentic response to life's challenges and opportunities. In a world that profits from keeping us scattered and distracted, learning to access these depths is not just a personal practice, but an act of quiet revolution, a reclaiming of our full human potential. Chapter 2. Questioning the Obvious. True deep thinking begins with asking better questions. Here, you'll learn how to challenge assumptions, see patterns others miss, and look beyond the surface answers. It's about developing the courage to doubt the easy explanations and seek the profound truths. The tyranny of the obvious. We live in a world where the obvious rules supreme. Walk into any office, classroom, or social gathering, and you'll witness the collective nodding of heads as people accept surface-level explanations without pause. The sky is blue, water is wet, success requires hard work, and failure means you didn't try hard enough. These statements feel so fundamentally true that questioning them seems almost absurd. But here lies the first trap of shallow thinking, mistaking familiarity for truth. The obvious is seductive precisely because it requires no mental effort. It's the cognitive equivalent of fast food, immediately satisfying but ultimately hollow. When we accept the obvious without investigation, we surrender our capacity for genuine insight and resign ourselves to a life of intellectual mediocrity. Consider how many revolutionary discoveries began with someone brave enough to question what everyone else took for granted. Galileo questioned the obvious truth that the Earth was the center of the universe. Darwin questioned the obvious explanation for the diversity of life. Einstein questioned the obvious nature of time and space itself. Each of these thinkers understood that the obvious is often the enemy of the profound. The tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives operating within the boundaries of conventional wisdom, never realizing that some of their most fundamental assumptions about reality might be completely wrong. They mistake consensus for correctness and popularity for truth. They accept inherited beliefs as if they were natural laws, never pausing to examine whether these beliefs actually serve them or merely limit them. This is why developing the skill of questioning the obvious is perhaps the most crucial aspect of deep thinking. It's not about becoming a contrarian who disagrees with everything simply for the sake of disagreement. Rather, it's about cultivating a genuine curiosity that refuses to be satisfied with surface answers. It's about developing what I call intelligent skepticism, the ability to suspend judgment long enough to truly examine what you think you know. The architecture of assumptions. Before we can effectively question assumptions, we must first understand how they form and function in our mental landscape. Assumptions are like the foundation of a building, largely invisible, rarely examined, but absolutely critical to everything built upon them. Most of our assumptions were formed not through careful deliberation, but through a combination of cultural conditioning, personal experience, and cognitive shortcuts. From the moment we're born, we begin absorbing assumptions about how the world works. We learn that success looks a certain way, that relationships follow certain patterns, that money behaves according to certain rules. These assumptions become so deeply embedded in our thinking that we rarely recognize them as assumptions at all. They simply become the way things are. But here's what makes assumptions particularly dangerous. They're self-reinforcing. Once we accept an assumption, we unconsciously filter reality to confirm it. We notice evidence that supports our beliefs and ignore or dismiss evidence that challenges them. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, but it's more than just a cognitive quirk, it's a fundamental barrier to deep thinking. Take the assumption that you need money to make money. This seems obviously true to most people, and they can easily find examples to support it. Wealthy people investing in stocks, starting businesses with capital, buying real estate, the evidence appears overwhelming. But this assumption prevents them from noticing countless examples of people who created wealth from nothing, who leveraged skills instead of capital, who found ways to generate value without initial investment. The assumption becomes a prison, not because it's entirely false, but because treating it as absolute truth closes off entire categories of possibility. This is why questioning assumptions isn't about determining whether they're right or wrong. It's about examining whether they're serving you or limiting you. Every assumption carries within it an implicit boundary. When you assume that successful people wake up early, you've created a boundary around success that excludes night owls. When you assume that good relationships require compromise, you've established a framework that might prevent you from finding relationships built on genuine compatibility rather than mutual sacrifice. The most powerful assumptions are often the ones that feel most obviously true. They're the beliefs that make you think, of course that's how it works, how could it be otherwise? These are precisely the assumptions most worth examining, because they exert the strongest influence over your thinking while remaining largely unconscious. The courage to doubt. Questioning fundamental assumptions requires a particular type of courage that most people never develop. It's not physical courage. It's the intellectual and emotional courage to doubt what you think you know, especially when that knowledge forms the foundation of your identity or worldview. This courage is rare because doubt is uncomfortable. We're psychologically wired to seek certainty and avoid cognitive dissonance. When we question a deeply held belief, we create internal tension that our minds desperately want to resolve. Most people resolve this tension by quickly returning to their original belief, perhaps slightly modified but fundamentally unchanged. But deep thinkers learn to sit with this discomfort. They understand that the period of doubt, that uncomfortable space between the old certainty and new understanding, is where genuine insight occurs. It's in this space that assumptions lose their grip, patterns become visible, and new possibilities emerge. Consider what it takes to question something as fundamental as your career path. Most people choose a career based on a combination of family expectations, social status, perceived security, and natural aptitude. These factors seem so obviously important that questioning them feels almost irresponsible. But what if the entire framework of career as a single linear path is outdated? What if security is an illusion? What if following your natural aptitude leads you away from your deepest fulfillment? To truly examine these questions requires the courage to sit with uncertainty about something as fundamental as how you'll spend the majority of your adult life. It means being willing to discover that years of education and effort might have been based on faulty assumptions. It means risking the disapproval of people whose opinions you value. This is why most people never develop deep thinking skills, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack the courage to doubt what they think they know. They prefer the comfort of certainty, even if that certainty is limiting them. The courage to doubt also requires intellectual humility, the recognition that your current understanding, no matter how sophisticated, is always provisional. This doesn't mean becoming wishy-washy or unable to make decisions. Rather, it means holding your beliefs lightly enough that you can examine them without feeling personally threatened. When you develop this courage, something remarkable happens. You begin to see that many of the limitations you thought were external are actually internal. Many of the problems you thought were unsolvable have solutions that become visible once you question the assumptions that made them seem impossible. Recognizing hidden patterns. Once you've developed the skill of questioning assumptions, you begin to notice patterns that were previously invisible. These patterns exist at multiple levels, in your personal life, in society, in how systems function, and in how problems and solutions relate to each other. The ability to see hidden patterns is what distinguishes genuine insight from mere information processing. Anyone can collect facts and regurgitate them. But seeing how seemingly unrelated facts connect, how apparently different situations share underlying structures, how current trends might lead to unexpected outcomes, this is the domain of deep thinking. Hidden patterns often exist precisely because they contradict obvious explanations. Take the pattern of how innovations actually spread through society. The obvious explanation is that better products win in the marketplace, that quality and utility determine success. But if you look deeper, you'll notice that many inferior products dominate markets while superior alternatives remain obscure. The hidden pattern reveals that adoption isn't primarily about quality. It's about network effects, timing, marketing effectiveness, and psychological factors that have nothing to do with the product's actual merit. This pattern is hidden because acknowledging it challenges our comforting belief that we live in a meritocracy where the best ideas naturally rise to the top. Similarly, in personal development, the obvious pattern seems to be that success comes from setting goals and working hard to achieve them. But deeper observation reveals that many highly successful people didn't follow traditional goal-setting approaches. Instead, they developed systems, capitalized on unexpected opportunities, and often succeeded in ways they never planned. The hidden pattern suggests that rigid goal setting might actually limit success by creating tunnel vision and preventing people from recognizing opportunities that don't fit their predetermined plans. This pattern remains hidden because it contradicts the obvious wisdom promoted by most self-help literature. Recognizing these patterns requires what I call peripheral vision thinking, the ability to notice what's happening at the edges of your attention while everyone else is focused on the center. It's like being the person in a crowd who notices the subtle shift in mood that precedes a change in the group's behavior, while others only notice the change after it's already occurred. This skill develops through practice and intentionality. You begin to ask different questions. What's working that nobody talks about? What's failing despite widespread acceptance? What factors are being ignored in popular explanations? What would this situation look like from a completely different perspective? The art of better questions. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your thinking. Most people ask questions that lead them in circles, reinforcing what they already believe rather than opening new avenues of exploration. They ask, how can I prove I'm right? Instead of what if I'm wrong? They ask, how can I get what I want? Instead of what do I actually need? Better questions have certain characteristics that distinguish them from ordinary questions. They're open-ended rather than leading, exploratory rather than confirmatory, and generative rather than merely analytical. They create space for unexpected answers rather than constraining responses to predetermined categories. Instead of asking, how can I make more money? A deeper thinker might ask, what assumptions am I making about the relationship between money and security? Instead of, why don't people understand me? They might ask, what am I communicating beyond my words? And how might someone reasonably interpret my behavior differently? The shift from surface questions to deep questions often involves moving from how and what to why and what if. But even more importantly, it involves questioning the questions themselves. Why am I asking this particular question? What assumptions are embedded in how I frame this problem? What would this question look like from someone else's perspective? One of the most powerful questioning techniques is what I call assumption archaeology, deliberately digging into the layers of assumptions buried within any situation. Take a seemingly simple question like, how can I be more productive? Buried within this question are numerous assumptions. That productivity is inherently good, that you're currently unproductive, that productivity can be measured, that more is better than different, and that the problem lies with you rather than your environment or goals. By excavating these assumptions, you might discover that your productivity problem isn't about time management or efficiency. It's about working on things that don't align with your values, or trying to be productive in ways that conflict with your natural rhythms, or accepting someone else's definition of what productivity means. Better questions also tend to be more specific about context while remaining open about outcomes. Instead of, what should I do with my life? Questions so broad that it paralyzes rather than illuminates. You might ask, given my current circumstances and genuine interests, what small experiment could I try that might reveal something important about what fulfills me? Moving beyond surface answers. Surface answers feel complete, but they're actually conversation stoppers disguised as solutions. They give you the illusion of understanding while preventing deeper exploration. When someone asks why they're struggling financially, the surface answer might be, because you don't make enough money. This answer feels true and complete, but actually explains nothing and offers no useful direction. Deep thinking requires moving beyond these surface answers to explore the territory they conceal. Why don't you make enough money? Is it because you lack skills? Because you're in the wrong field? Because you've accepted limiting beliefs about your worth? Because you're optimizing for the wrong things? Because you're operating with an outdated model of how value is created? Each of these directions opens up entirely different possibilities for understanding and action. The person who discovers they're optimizing for the wrong things will pursue different solutions than someone who realizes they've accepted limiting beliefs about their worth. This is why surface answers are so dangerous. They prevent you from finding the real leverage points for change. They give you the comfort of an explanation without the power of genuine understanding. Moving beyond surface answers requires developing what I call investigative persistence, the ability to keep asking, and what's beneath that, until you reach something genuinely useful. Most people give up at the first or second level of explanation. Deep thinkers keep going until they find the assumptions, patterns, and dynamics that actually determine outcomes. This process isn't about finding the real truth, it's about finding more useful truths. A surface answer like, I'm not good at networking, might be factually accurate, but it's not useful because it suggests the problem is fixed and inherent. Digging deeper, you might discover that you're not bad at connecting with people, you're uncomfortable with traditional networking because it feels transactional and inauthentic. This deeper understanding opens up entirely different possibilities. Instead of trying to force yourself to be better at something that conflicts with your values, you might explore authentic ways to build professional relationships, or find career paths where traditional networking is less important, or redefine networking as genuine relationship building rather than strategic schmoozing. Practical techniques for deep questioning. Developing the skill of questioning the obvious requires specific techniques that you can practice and refine over time. These aren't just intellectual exercises, they're practical tools that will fundamentally change how you approach problems, decisions, and challenges. The first technique is what I call assumption inventory. Whenever you're facing a situation that seems problematic or stuck, write down every assumption you can identify about that situation. Don't judge whether the assumptions are right or wrong. Just identify them. Were you assuming about the other people involved? About the constraints you're operating under? About what success would look like? About what's possible or impossible? This process alone often reveals the source of your stuckness. You'll frequently discover that you've been operating with assumptions that aren't actually true, or that are true but not absolute, or that are serving other people's interests rather than your own. The second technique is perspective multiplication. Take any situation and deliberately view it from at least 3 radically different perspectives. If you're dealing with a difficult employee, consider it from their perspective, from their family's perspective, and from a consultant who specializes in organizational psychology. Each perspective will reveal different aspects of the situation that were invisible from your original viewpoint. The third technique is temporal questioning. Most problems seem urgent and permanent when you're in the middle of them. But asking temporal questions can provide crucial perspective. How will this matter in 5 years? What would someone who successfully solved this problem 10 years from now want me to understand? If this situation had to get worse before it got better, what would that teach me about the real issue? The fourth technique is constraint questioning. Every situation appears to have constraints, things you can't change or control. But often, these constraints are more flexible than they appear. Ask yourself, which of these constraints are actually laws of physics, and which are just current circumstances? What would this situation look like if my biggest constraint suddenly disappeared? What creative ways might exist to work within or around these constraints? The fifth technique is outcome questioning. Instead of focusing on how to solve the problem as currently defined, question the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Why do you want to solve this problem? What would having it solved give you? Is this actually your problem or someone else's problem that you've accepted? What if solving this problem perfectly still didn't give you what you really want? The transformation of perspective. When you consistently apply these deep questioning techniques, something profound happens. Your entire relationship with problems begins to change. What once seemed like fixed obstacles start to appear more fluid. What once felt like external limitations reveal themselves as internal assumptions. What once appeared to be isolated issues show themselves as part of larger patterns. This transformation isn't just about becoming better at problem solving. It's about developing a fundamentally different way of engaging with reality. Instead of accepting the world as it appears, you begin to see it as a complex system of interconnected elements, many of which are more malleable than they initially seem. You start to notice that most people are operating with unexamined assumptions that create unnecessary limitations. You begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles, not because you're more optimistic, but because you're asking different questions. You develop the ability to find leverage points that others miss because they're focused on the obvious aspects of situations. This shift in perspective also changes how you relate to uncertainty and complexity. Instead of finding these states uncomfortable, you begin to see them as rich with possibility. You understand that the most interesting insights often emerge at the intersection of different domains, in the spaces between categories, in the questions that don't have obvious answers. Perhaps most importantly, you develop what I call intellectual sovereignty, the confidence to think for yourself rather than deferring to conventional wisdom. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of expertise. Rather, it means developing the judgment to distinguish between genuine expertise and mere authority, between tested wisdom and inherited prejudice. This transformation ultimately leads to a life of greater freedom and effectiveness. When you're no longer constrained by unexamined assumptions, when you can see patterns that others miss, when you can ask questions that reveal hidden possibilities, you gain access to solutions and opportunities that remain invisible to surface-level thinkers. The path of questioning the obvious isn't always comfortable, but it's the only path to genuine insight. In a world where most people accept easy explanations and surface answers, the person who develops deep questioning skills gains an enormous advantage. They see what others cannot see. They understand what others cannot grasp, and they can act on insights that others never discover. This is the beginning of true intellectual power, not the ability to remember information or manipulate concepts, but the ability to see through the illusions that limit most people's thinking and to find the profound truths that lie hidden beneath the obvious explanations. Chapter 3. The Power of Mental Stillness. The silent revolution in your mind. In our hyperconnected world, silence has become a rare commodity. We live surrounded by an endless symphony of notifications, conversations, background music, and the constant chatter of our own minds. Yet within this chaos lies a profound paradox. The deepest insights, the most creative breakthroughs, and the clearest understanding emerge not from more noise, but from deliberate stillness. Mental stillness is not merely the absence of thought. It's the presence of focused awareness. It's the difference between a turbulent river where you can't see the bottom and a still mountain lake where every stone beneath the surface is crystal clear. When we achieve true mental stillness, our minds become like that pristine lake, reflecting reality with perfect clarity and allowing us to perceive connections that were previously invisible. The ancient philosophers understood this principle intimately. Archimedes had his eureka moment not while frantically working at his desk, but while relaxing in a bath. Darwin's theory of evolution crystallized during long, contemplative walks. Einstein spoke of his greatest insights coming not through rigorous calculation, but through what he called combinatory play in a relaxed, quiet mind. These weren't coincidences, they were natural consequences of accessing the deeper layers of consciousness that only emerge in stillness. Understanding mental noise. Before we can cultivate stillness, we must understand what we're working against. Mental noise manifests in several distinct forms, each presenting its own challenges to deep thinking. There's the obvious external noise, the pings, beeps, and buzzes of our devices. But far more insidious is the internal noise, the endless stream of worries about the future, replaying of past conversations, mental to-do lists that multiply like hydra heads, and the constant self-commentary that narrates our every experience. This internal chatter operates like a radio that's never turned off, playing in the background even when we're not consciously listening. It fragments our attention, scatters our mental energy, and prevents us from accessing the deeper, more integrative levels of consciousness where genuine insight occurs. Imagine trying to hear a subtle musical melody while standing next to a construction site. The noise doesn't just compete for attention, it actively prevents us from perceiving the subtler signals our mind are trying to process. The cost of this constant mental noise extends far beyond simple distraction. Research in cognitive neuroscience reveals that our brains have two primary modes of operation: the focused attention network, which handles deliberate, conscious thinking, and the default mode network, which becomes active during rest and introspection. The default mode network is where much of our creative and integrative thinking happens. It's where disparate ideas combine in novel ways, where insights emerge from the depths of our unconscious processing. When our minds are constantly occupied with noise, we never allow the default mode network to fully engage. We remain stuck in the shallow waters of conscious, linear thinking, never diving deep enough to access the vast reservoir of wisdom and creativity that lies beneath the surface of our awareness. The neuroscience of stillness. Modern brain imaging technology has revealed fascinating insights into what happens when we achieve states of mental stillness. During meditation, contemplation, or deep focus, several remarkable changes occur in brain activity. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and self-referential thinking, shows decreased activity, what researchers call transient hypofrontality. This temporary quieting of our internal narrator allows other brain networks to become more active and interconnected. Simultaneously, the brain begins to generate more alpha waves associated with relaxed awareness and creative insight. The boundaries between different brain regions become more permeable, allowing for increased communication between areas that normally operate independently. This enhanced connectivity is precisely what enables the kind of cross-domain thinking that leads to breakthrough insights. Perhaps most intriguingly, neuroplasticity research shows that regular practice of mental stillness actually rewires the brain over time. The insula, which governs self-awareness, becomes more developed. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, becomes less reactive to stress. The corpus callosum, which connects the brain's two hemispheres, shows increased white matter density, facilitating better integration between logical and intuitive processing. These aren't merely interesting scientific observations, they represent a fundamental shift in how our minds process information. By cultivating mental stillness, we're literally reshaping our neural architecture to support deeper, more integrated thinking. Practical techniques for achieving mental stillness. Creating mental stillness is both an art and a science, requiring both understanding and practice. The following techniques have been refined over centuries and validated by modern research, each offering a different pathway to the same destination: a quiet, focused, deeply receptive state of mind. The foundation: conscious breathing. Every tradition that values mental stillness begins with a breath, and for good reason. Breathing is both voluntary and involuntary, conscious and unconscious, providing a perfect bridge between our active minds and our deeper awareness. The simple act of focusing on your breath immediately begins to quiet mental chatter by giving your attention a single, present moment anchor. Start by finding a comfortable position where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and simply observe your natural breathing rhythm without trying to change it. Notice the subtle sensation of air entering your nostrils, the gentle expansion of your chest and belly, the brief pause at the top of each inhale, and the slow release of each exhale. When your mind inevitably wanders, and it will, gently return your attention to the breath without judgment or frustration. This technique works because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, shifting your body and mind from a state of arousal and reactivity to one of calm alertness. Regular practice develops what might be called attentional fitness, the ability to sustain focus on a chosen object while remaining aware of when your mind has wandered. Progressive mental clearing. Building on the foundation of breath awareness, progressive mental clearing involves systematically releasing the various forms of mental tension that accumulate throughout the day. Begin with your breathing practice, then gradually expand your awareness to notice the different layers of mental activity. First, acknowledge any obvious thoughts or concerns that are occupying your attention. Rather than pushing them away, simply observe them with detached curiosity, as you might watch clouds passing across the sky. Notice how thoughts arise, persist for a while, then naturally fade away when you don't feed them with additional attention. Next, become aware of any emotional tensions or residual feelings from recent experiences. Again, don't try to eliminate them, but simply acknowledge their presence and allow them to be there without resistance. Often, the simple act of conscious acknowledgement allows these tensions to begin dissolving on their own. Finally, notice any physical sensations or areas of tension in your body. Mental and physical tension are intimately connected. A tight jaw often reflects mental stress. Tense shoulders carry the weight of our worries. As you breathe, consciously relax these areas, allowing the physical release to support mental quieting. The practice of single-pointed focus. Once you've established basic stillness, the practice of single-pointed focus develops the capacity for sustained, undivided attention. Choose a simple object for focus. It could be a candle flame, a small stone, a piece of music, or even a single word or phrase. The key is to maintain gentle but unwavering attention on your chosen focus point. This isn't about forcing or straining your attention, but rather about developing the skill of returning to your focus point each time you notice your mind has wandered. Think of it like training a friendly puppy. When it wanders off, you gently call it back without anger or frustration. Each return to focus is not a failure, but a successful repetition that strengthens your attentional muscles. Over time, this practice develops what contemplatives call one-pointedness, the ability to sustain focused attention for extended periods without effort or strain. This capacity is essential for deep thinking because it allows you to maintain focus on complex problems long enough for your unconscious mind to make the subtle connections that lead to insight. Creating the optimal environment for stillness. While mental stillness ultimately comes from within, external conditions can significantly support or hinder your practice. Creating an environment conducive to deep thinking involves both eliminating distractions and actively cultivating conditions that promote focus and clarity. Physical space design. Your physical environment should support rather than compete with your attention. This doesn't require an elaborate setup. Even a simple corner of a room can become a sanctuary for deep thinking if arranged thoughtfully. The key principles are simplicity, comfort, and minimal sensory distraction. Choose a space with good natural light if possible, as this supports alertness without the harshness of artificial lighting. Ensure comfortable temperature and good air circulation. Subtle discomforts can become major distractions when you're trying to achieve deep focus. Remove or minimize visual clutter, as a chaotic environment tends to create chaotic thinking. Consider incorporating natural elements that promote calm. A plant, a stone, a small water feature, or simply a window with a view of trees or sky. These elements don't just create a pleasant atmosphere. They actively support the relaxed alertness that characterizes deep thinking states. Temporal boundaries. Creating stillness also requires establishing clear temporal boundaries. This means not just setting aside time for practice, but protecting that time from the intrusion of other activities and concerns. Many practitioners find it helpful to begin with shorter periods, even 5 to 10 minutes, but to maintain those boundaries absolutely. Inform others of your unavailability during these periods, turn off all devices, and resist the temptation to just quickly check something during your practice time. The mind needs to learn that this time is sacred, protected from the usual demands and distractions. This creates a psychological container within which stillness can develop. Many find that establishing a regular routine, the same time each day, the same location, even the same duration, helps condition the mind to settle more quickly into stillness. The familiar routine becomes a signal to your unconscious that it's time to shift into a different mode of awareness. Advanced practices, deeper states of stillness. Once you've established proficiency with basic stillness techniques, several advanced practices can lead to even deeper states of clarity and insight. These aren't necessarily more difficult, but they require the foundation of basic stillness skills to be truly effective. Contemplative inquiry. This practice involves entering a state of stillness and then gently introducing a question or theme for contemplation. Unlike analytical thinking, which approaches problems through logical progression, contemplative inquiry allows insights to emerge organically from the stillness itself. Begin with your usual stillness practice, allowing your mind to settle completely. Then, like dropping a stone into a still pond, gently introduce your question or theme. This might be a specific problem you're working on, a philosophical question that interests you, or simply an open inquiry like, what do I most need to understand right now? The key is to pose the question and then return to stillness, allowing your unconscious mind to work with the question without interference from your analytical thinking. Insights often arise not as logical conclusions but as sudden understanding, complete perspectives that emerge fully formed from the depths of awareness. Awareness of awareness. This subtle practice involves shifting attention from any particular object of focus to the awareness itself that perceives all objects. Instead of focusing on your breath, thoughts, or sensations, you focus on the aware presence that observes all these experiences. This practice can be challenging to understand conceptually, but it's quite natural experientially. It's like shifting attention from the contents of a mirror to the mirror itself, the clear, spacious awareness that reflects all experiences without being changed by them. Regular practice of this awareness develops what might be called metacognitive clarity, the ability to observe your own thinking processes with detached precision. Integration and transition. The ultimate goal of mental stillness practices isn't to escape from normal consciousness, but to bring the clarity and depth of stillness into everyday thinking and problem solving. This requires developing skills for transitioning between states of stillness and active engagement while maintaining the benefits of both. Learn to recognize the quality of awareness that characterizes stillness, the spacious, alert, non-reactive presence, and practice maintaining this quality even while engaged in thinking or problem solving. This creates what might be called dynamic stillness, a state of active engagement that retains the clarity and depth of contemplative awareness. Over time, this integration transforms not just how you think about specific problems, but how you relate to thinking itself. You develop confidence in the power of stillness to generate insight, patience to allow understanding to emerge naturally, and discrimination to recognize the difference between genuine insight and mere mental activity. The cultivation of mental stillness is ultimately a practice of coming home to your own deepest intelligence. In a world that increasingly values speed over depth, reaction over reflection, and noise over insight, the ability to access stillness becomes not just personally valuable, but culturally essential. It's in these quiet spaces of the mind that wisdom emerges, creativity flourishes, and understanding deepens into genuine knowledge. Through patient practice of these techniques, you develop not just the ability to think more clearly about specific problems, but a fundamental reorientation toward thinking itself, one that recognizes stillness not as the absence of intelligence, but as its most refined expression. Chapter 4: Thinking for a Lifetime. The foundation of a thinking life. Deep thinking is not a skill you master once and then abandon. It's not a tool you pick up when facing major decisions and then set aside when life becomes routine. Deep thinking is a way of being, a fundamental approach to existence that transforms how you navigate relationships, career choices, creative pursuits, and the countless small moments that compose a human life. Most people treat thinking as a chore, something to be rushed through on the way to action. They mistake the frenetic pace of modern life for productivity, confusing motion with progress. But those who understand the art of deep thinking recognize that the quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives. Every decision flows from our thinking. Every relationship is shaped by how we process emotions and interpret behaviors. Every creative breakthrough emerges from our willingness to sit with complexity rather than rushing toward premature conclusions. The difference between surface-level thinking and deep thinking is like the difference between skimming across a lake and diving into its depths. Surface thinking gives you the illusion of covering ground quickly, but you never discover what lies beneath. Deep thinking requires you to slow down, to resist the pull of instant gratification, and to trust that the process of careful reflection will yield insights unavailable to those who merely skim the surface. This transformation begins with a simple recognition. Your mind is your most valuable possession, and like any valuable possession, it requires regular maintenance, thoughtful cultivation, and deliberate improvement. You wouldn't neglect your health or your relationships, yet most people spend more time maintaining their cars than developing their capacity for thought. Creating your daily architecture of thinking. Building a thinking life requires what I call architectural thinking, the deliberate design of your daily environment to support deep reflection. This isn't about finding more hours in the day. It's about creating spaces and structures that naturally encourage thoughtful engagement with your experience. Start with your morning routine. The first hour after waking is when your mind is most receptive to deep thinking. Your brain hasn't yet been colonized by the day's urgent demands, emails, or the mental chatter that accumulates throughout the day. This is prime real estate for reflection, and most people squander it by immediately reaching for their phones or rushing into activity. Instead, create what I call a thinking sanctuary in your morning. This might be 15 minutes with a journal, exploring a question that's been nagging at you. It might be a walk without podcast or music, allowing your mind to wander and make unexpected connections. The key is consistency. The same time, the same space, the same commitment to letting your thoughts develop without interruption. Your physical environment profoundly influences your capacity for deep thinking. The cluttered desk, the constant notifications, the open browser tabs, these aren't merely distractions. They're actively training your brain for superficiality. Create spaces that signal to your unconscious mind that deep thinking is valued here. This might mean a reading chair positioned away from screens, a notebook dedicated solely to exploring complex ideas, or simply the habit of closing your door when you need to think. The evening presents another crucial opportunity. While mornings are ideal for generative thinking, exploring new ideas and making connections, evenings are perfect for reflective thinking. This is when you can process the day's experiences, extract lessons from challenges, and identify patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed. The practice of evening reflection doesn't require extensive time, but it does require intention. What went well today? What could have been handled differently? What did I learn about myself or others? The art of decision-making through deep thinking. Every day, you make hundreds of decisions. Most are unconscious and automatic: what to wear, which route to take, how to respond to a colleague's comment. But scattered throughout these routine choices are decisions that shape the trajectory of your life. The quality of these consequential decisions depends entirely on your ability to think deeply about what matters most. Traditional decision-making frameworks focus on listing pros and cons or analyzing potential outcomes. These methods have value, but they often miss the deeper currents that influence our choices. Deep thinking about decisions requires you to examine not just the practical considerations, but the values, assumptions, and emotional patterns that drive your preferences. When facing a significant decision, begin by exploring what you really want, not what you think you should want or what others expect you to want, but what genuinely resonates with your deepest values and aspirations. This requires honest self-examination, often revealing conflicts between different parts of yourself. The career-focused part of you might want the promotion, while the relationship-focused part worries about the impact on family time. The security-focused part advocates for the safe choice, while the growth-focused part yearns for the challenge. Deep thinking about decisions also means extending your time horizon. Most people make choices based on how they'll feel in the next week or month. Deep thinkers consider how they'll view the decision in 5 or 10 years. They ask not just, will this make me happy? But will this contribute to the person I'm becoming? They recognize that the best decisions often involve short-term discomfort in service of long-term alignment with their values. Consider the decision to change careers, a choice that illustrates the difference between surface-level and deep thinking. Surface-level thinking focuses on immediate factors: salary, commute, job security. Deep thinking explores more fundamental questions. What kind of work gives my life meaning? How do I want to spend the precious hours of my days? What legacy do I want to create through my professional contributions? This deeper inquiry often reveals that career decisions aren't really about careers at all. They're about identity, purpose, and the kind of life you want to build. The accountant who dreams of teaching isn't just changing jobs. They're choosing to prioritize impact over income, relationships over status, personal fulfillment over external validation. These insights only emerge through sustained reflection on what truly matters, cultivating intellectual humility and curiosity. Deep thinking for a lifetime requires a fundamental shift in your relationship with knowledge and certainty. Most people treat their opinions and beliefs as possessions to be defended rather than hypotheses to be tested. They seek information that confirms what they already think and avoid experiences that might challenge their worldview. This approach feels psychologically comfortable, but it's the enemy of growth and wisdom. Intellectual humility, the recognition that you might be wrong about things you feel certain about, is perhaps the most important quality for lifelong thinking. It doesn't mean being wishy-washy or lacking conviction. Instead, it means holding your beliefs strongly enough to act on them while remaining open enough to change them when presented with compelling evidence. This humility manifests in how you approach disagreement. Instead of immediately defending your position or looking for flaws in opposing arguments, intellectual humility encourages you to first understand why thoughtful people might disagree with you. What do they see that you might be missing? What experiences have shaped their perspective in ways that differ from your own? This doesn't mean abandoning your views at the first sign of opposition, but it does mean engaging with disagreement as an opportunity for learning rather than a threat to be defeated. Curiosity is humility's natural companion. While humility opens you to the possibility that you might be wrong, curiosity motivates you to actively seek out new perspectives and experiences. Curious thinkers don't just tolerate uncertainty, they're energized by it. They see gaps in their knowledge not as embarrassing deficiencies, but as exciting frontiers to explore. Cultivating curiosity means regularly exposing yourself to ideas and experiences outside your comfort zone. This might involve reading books by authors whose worldviews differ from your own, traveling to places that challenge your assumptions, or simply having deeper conversations with people whose backgrounds and perspectives differ from yours. The goal isn't to become infinitely open-minded. Some ideas genuinely are better than others, but to ensure that your beliefs are tested against the strongest possible alternatives. The compound effect of sustained thinking. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of deep thinking is its compound effect over time. Unlike physical capabilities that peak and then decline, your capacity for wisdom and insight can continue growing throughout your entire life. Each experience, properly reflected upon, becomes raw material for future understanding. Each challenge overcome through careful thinking increases your confidence in your ability to navigate future complexity. This compound effect explains why some people seem to become wiser and more insightful as they age, while others simply accumulate more opinions and biases. The difference lies in their relationship with experience. Those who grow wiser treat their experiences as data to be analyzed, patterns to be recognized, and lessons to be extracted. They view mistakes not as failures to be forgotten, but as valuable information about what doesn't work. They see successes not as proof of their superiority, but as opportunities to understand what factors contributed to positive outcomes. Over time, this approach builds what we might call wisdom capital, a rich repository of insights, patterns, and principles that can be applied to new situations. Unlike specialized knowledge, which becomes obsolete as circumstances change, wisdom capital becomes more valuable over time because it deals with the enduring patterns of human behavior, decision-making, and meaning-making that persist across different contexts. The ripple effects of a thinking life. When you commit to deep thinking as a way of life, the benefits extend far beyond your personal development. Your capacity for thoughtful analysis and reflection becomes a gift you offer to others in your family relationships, professional collaborations, and community involvement. People begin to seek your perspective not because you have all the answers, but because they trust your process of thinking through complex issues. Your children learn that problems can be approached thoughtfully rather than reactively. Your colleagues discover that meetings become more productive when someone consistently asks the deeper questions that others are avoiding. Your friends find that conversations with you leave them feeling more clear about their own challenges and opportunities. This influence operates subtly but powerfully. You become a model of what it looks like to approach life thoughtfully, demonstrating that there's an alternative to the rush toward quick fixes and superficial solutions that dominates much of contemporary culture. Your commitment to depth gives others permission to slow down, to think more carefully, and to value understanding over mere information. Living the questions. Deep thinking for a lifetime ultimately means learning to live comfortably with questions, not just asking them, but dwelling with them long enough for real insights to emerge. Our culture's obsession with quick answers and immediate solutions works against this deeper process. We're encouraged to Google our questions, consult experts, or find shortcuts to understanding. But the most important questions about how to live, what to prioritize, and what gives life meaning can't be answered through external sources alone. These questions require you to live your way into the answers over time. The question of what career path will be most fulfilling can only be answered through years of experimentation, reflection, and honest self-assessment. The question of how to balance professional ambition with family relationships requires ongoing attention and adjustment as circumstances change. The question of what legacy you want to leave continues evolving as you gain new experiences and perspectives. Living the questions means resisting the premature closure that our efficiency-obsessed culture demands. It means staying curious about areas where you think you already know the answers. It means remaining open to the possibility that your fundamental assumptions about life might need revision as you encounter new experiences and perspectives. This doesn't mean becoming indecisive or paralyzed by endless analysis. Instead, it means recognizing that the deepest questions about human existence are never finally answered. They're lived into more fully over time. Your understanding of love deepens through decades of relationships. Your grasp of leadership evolves through years of actually leading people. Your sense of purpose clarifies through the accumulated experience of choosing meaning over comfort, growth over security, contribution over consumption. The ultimate integration. Deep thinking for a lifetime isn't a practice you add to an already busy life. It's a transformation of how you approach life itself. It changes how you listen to others, moving beyond surface content to understand deeper motivations and concerns. It changes how you read, shifting from information consumption to genuine engagement with ideas. It changes how you work, bringing thoughtful analysis to bear on challenges instead of relying solely on experience or intuition. Most importantly, it changes your relationship with time itself. Instead of seeing time as something to be filled with activity, you begin to see it as space for reflection, growth, and meaning-making. This shift allows you to extract maximum value from your experiences, ensuring that the decades of your life build upon each other rather than simply accumulating without direction. The person who commits to thinking deeply for a lifetime discovers that age becomes an asset rather than a limitation. Each passing year brings greater capacity for wisdom, deeper understanding of patterns and connections, and increasing skill at navigating complexity without losing clarity. They develop what the ancient Greeks called phronesis, practical wisdom that enables them to make good decisions in difficult circumstances. This is the ultimate promise of deep thinking, not that you'll always make perfect choices or avoid all mistakes, but that you'll live with intention and awareness. You'll understand why you make the choices you make. You'll recognize patterns in your behavior and relationships that allow for conscious improvement. You'll contribute to others' growth and understanding because your own thinking has been refined through years of careful cultivation. In a world that seems increasingly frantic and superficial, the person who thinks deeply becomes an anchor point of stability and wisdom. They offer something increasingly rare and valuable, the gift of sustained attention, careful analysis, and hard-won insight. They demonstrate that there's an alternative to the reactive life, a life of conscious choice, deliberate growth, and ever-deepening understanding. This is what it means to make deep thinking not just a skill, but a way of life. It's an invitation to live with greater intention, to grow wiser rather than simply older, and to contribute to the world through the quality of your thinking and the depth of your reflection. In choosing this path, you join a tradition that stretches back through history, the tradition of those who believe that the examined life is worth living and that the careful cultivation of thought is one of humanity's highest achievements.